Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is an action drama from Ireland, English language, released in the year 2017, directed by Simon Dixon, and this film is called Tiger Aid. So the story of Tiger Aid, it's set in the Middle East. You've got two Irish mercenaries who are working for this boss who's very dangerous, and their job is to go to this secluded mansion and kidnap the daughter of this important figure. So this is what they do. They can't ask questions, and if they're told to kill someone, they have to kill them. So when they get to this secluded mansion, there's a few complications that arise that make actually delivering this mission very difficult. And so they start to second guess what they're doing, which ultimately puts a lot of strain and animosity between these two good friends. And so the situation is about to spiral out of control, and whether or not they can actually achieve what they set out to do, or in fact they self-destruct, is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Tiger Aid. This was a very interesting film, but unfortunately the interest is never really capitalised on, so it just remains an interesting film. It doesn't really strike you as a movie that I'd run out and say, go out there and see this right now. And so it does lack, I think, the quality that the movie thinks it has. And I think the reason why it doesn't have the quality is because not a lot goes on in this film. And so it does bill itself as an action movie, and if you go in there expecting action, you're going to be bitterly disappointed, because there are a few action scenes, but they splash them in the trailers. And so when you see the trailer, you actually get a movie from the trailer that is not really evident in the actual experience. And so that is my biggest problem. I thought the marketing is really going to hurt this film, because it's not really an action movie. It's more a case of a stage play of two men who are very interesting, very psychotic, but it's basically the destruction of violence and the violent nature in people and how destructive that can be and how it can cloud your judgment. So the movie is basically about judgment, and I thought that was an interesting aspect, is that you've got two great performances from the two leads. Brian Gleeson plays this guy who is very mysterious, and he's more of the psychotic person. Then you got Damien Maloney, who is an equally fascinating character, and I could sense the friendship there, but the world they were in, it wasn't really a room for a friendship. There was no compassion in this world. There was no forgiveness. It was basically a cold and brutal lifestyle that these people were living, but life isn't cold and brutal. That everyone has that goodness inside them, and you can sense that in these characters, and you can sense the torment they're being put through when they're told to do something with no questions asked. And if they decline something, then they are going to be put in danger themselves. And so there's always this dilemma in that they don't know what to do, and so you sense that frustration, you sense that sense of loss, and the impact does hit you quite hard, and it's contributed by a very good soundtrack. And I thought the soundtrack plays a character in its own, because the whole film was very desolate. I thought the cinematography was very good, but it's a very lonely environment that these people found themselves in. And so because there's a lacking of other characters, I thought, okay, this is the lonely sort of isolation that these characters are feeling inside their heads. And so it's a deeply psychological study, as I said, of these very fascinating people. There's not really enough to connect to them on a very personal level, because this is such a foreign world, and I think that was one of the problems, is they could have delved into the characters a little bit more to give it some relatability. But then as they start to unfold, as the situation unfolds, they start to show their heart, and I think that, okay, that was interesting, but the reason why it's not capitalized on is because it doesn't have the emotional depth to really connect to our world. And so if you get into a foreign world and these people doing horrible things, you think, well, why should I care about these people? And it does give you glimpses as to why you should care, but not enough to fully relate to it. And because you can't fully relate to it, you can disconnect yourself, and you're basically just watching a film that just doesn't really have anything thrilling going on. So there are, as I said, a few action scenes, but they are very sporadic. They're very few and far between, so it's relying on the dialogue. And I thought the dialogue was interesting to some degree, but the story really lacks that motivation. It lacks that X factor to make it a film that's worth watching. Is that, yes, it is memorable while you're watching it, but after you finish watching it, you're probably going to forget it very soon, is because I just think that it didn't have the emotional depth it really needed to in order to actually make this sort of film work. And so you go in there expecting an action film, what you come away with was a forgettable sort of psychological character study of two very interesting people, but that interest is never brought to a satisfactory sort of climax, and that to me was the biggest disappointment of the movie. And then you've also got some very stereotypical formula tropes, in that the way the plot thickens. I thought, I've seen this so many times before in films that are taking themselves much less seriously. So for a serious film to have these plot twists coming into the film, I thought it was a little bit out of place, and it was there just to make the film, to try and make the film more interesting. But unfortunately the plot twists, they feel very cheap, and they don't feel as though it connects to the emotional sort of response that the film wants. Therefore, that just felt like an aspect of the film film that was not needed, because basically it's about two people who are forced to do violence against people that they don't know, and they don't necessarily want to do this, but they have to. And so it didn't need plot twists and, you know, what's going on and who's this person or how's he connected to the next person. And so I just thought that was unneeded, and it was there just as a desperate attempt to try and breathe some life into this film, but unfortunately it fails to do so. So what it is basically a flatline sort of movie. It doesn't really have a heartbeat, and in the end what it is a movie that you could probably pass up the opportunity in seeing. So this was the biggest disappointment. You know, there are fine acting performances from these characters, but I felt as though the rest of the film didn't complement them, and these two actors really deserved a better film. So just not enough punch in the film to make it memorable. It's not a terrible film. As I said, there are interesting aspects, but not enough to really make this film, you know, to really excite someone into actually watching it. So overall, for Tiger Aid, I'm only going to give this one 2 stars. Go out there and see it if you're a fan of stage play sort of character studies, but if you're into action movies, this is definitely one that's going to disappoint you. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, thank you for watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.